What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to my workshop for another ramble video. So there's a bunch of knives on the table, but in a few minutes these are all going to be gone, and we're going to be talking about how knives are in real world practices, at least in my experience, from my perspective. As a knife community, or as part of a knife community and as a knife user and collector for many years now, I have noticed that on the YouTube channels that we have two types of YouTube reviewers. We have the collectors, and then we have the users of knives. And then we have, I guess we have a sub community of followers, you know, and when I first started in doing YouTube videos, I was in like the kind of followers category, because, you know, we all have to start somewhere, right? So, I mean, you could be a user of knives and then start a YouTube channel. That'd just be fine too, right? But what has happened is I've noticed that there's a trend in two types of videos over the years as I watched it. We got people who do theoretical knife reviews, as I call them. Then we got people who do real world knife reviews. So the real world knife reviews, as you guys all know, are just people who actually use their knives, test them out, and then report back. So that would be your more realistic review. The collectors, the purely collectors, are more toward, or you know, like 90% collector and 10% user kind of videos, and to the 100% just collecting and maybe just starting out possibly. Those are what I call theoretical reviewers, which means that they base their reviews off of just handling a knife and then not actually really using them. Or they watch other YouTube reviewers and then they just they just say, oh yeah, I agree with this YouTuber that, for example, this jimping is really good. Or I agree with that YouTuber that, oh, I love this blade shape and it cuts really well. Okay, so there's those two types. This video here, I'm going to go through some of the more talked about features of knives and what it really means to me in my real world experience. So right now I'm going to go and pause the videos, we're going to clear this table off, and then we're going to go through some of these features of knives, and we're going to talk about theoretical versus real world usage. All right, I'll be right back. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to talk about is fit and finish. All right, now this has been a hugely talked about topic, of course, whenever any YouTuber and knife users, collectors alike, talk about fit and finish. As a collector, I would expect that the fit and finish be completely impeccable and down to the very last details. And that poses a question as a knife reviewer: am I really being too critical on the knives that I get? And in a way, yes, I completely am, because especially for a collector, when I buy especially custom-made knives and even like high-end production knives, all right, I really expect that the fit and finish is down to the last detail. For example, this Marty Young custom knife. This knife runs on phosphor bronze washers. It is extremely smooth. Centering is dead on. The bolsters and the carbon fiber, no seams. I mean, literally, if I was to be blindfolded and you told me to run my fingers back and forth between these two materials, I can tell you I feel very, very little. I mean, in fact, there's literally nothing in certain cases, all right? So fit and finish is impeccable on this knife. Extremely smooth, no blade play, lockup is solid. Oh, look at that, no lock stick either, but once you lock this bad boy up, there's nothing, no movement whatsoever. Blade was sharp when it was brand new. I've since dulled it from use, and Jeff Juice had to sharpen this thing up for me. Very usable blade shape. So this is what I would call for like a fit and finish, all right? On your higher end production knives, such as these ZTs, ZT has been known to make very, very excellent fit and finish knives, in my opinion. I've never really had a ZT where I didn't consider the fit and finish impeccable. Very, very nice feeling knives. And on this side, of course, we have the CRKs. Now, with that being said, in a real world uses, does fit and finish actually affect usability? All right, I would have to say it affects it to a certain point. For example, this CRKT Hisatsu 2, very nice little gentleman's folder. It does have blade play. It does have lock rock. it still locks up, but the lock bar is going almost all the way touching to the other side. Now, in most cases, a lot of YouTube reviewers say, "Oh, this is no good. This is lockup is at like 90%, getting to 100% lockup," and it still has blade play, and it's not very smooth. Fit and finish isn't exactly great because around the sides here you can feel a little bit of sharpness, between at least the copy I got, between some of the scales and everything. But in terms of using it and cutting with it, it's purely functional. There's nothing wrong with this knife other than, so I guess what I'm getting at is, in this case, the fit and finish is basically cosmetic, all right? Same with my Boker Plus Excalibur. For the life of me, I cannot get this blade to be centered. You know what I mean? It's just, there's like no way. It just does not center. And, but, it's still an extremely effective tool. It locks up. This one, however, does not have blade play because I tightened the pivot down, and it just cuts just perfect, and it's fine, and deploys fine, right? So in that respect, it has nothing to do with real world uses, all right? Now, with that being said, have you get a knife that, that the centering, or not centering, the blade play is like out of control, right? And I mean, even when you have the pivot screw torqued all the way down, you're still getting like wild side-to-side blade play. Yeah, I can see how that would affect functionality in terms of, and that would be a fit and finish issue to me because that just means the tolerances are way off. But a little bit of blade play is not going to kill the functionality of the knife, guaranteed. All right, this knife right here. It's a SOG Pentagon Elite, one of my most used knives in my collection. This used to say Pentagon Elite right across the blade here, and you can see it's pretty much worn off. I've used the crap out of this blade. In fact, this is one of the very few knives that have been sent back for spot treatment directly at the SOG factory, and they sharpened it up for me. They even sharpened the top point here as well, so I didn't know that, and I cut myself on it when I got it back. Lockup is actually like 110%. You can't see it, but this lock tab is actually touching this right-hand side scale. That's a huge no-no normally during YouTuber reviews, right? It has up and down play. It clicks. It has side-to-side play. I mean, this knife is all sorts of disaster. It's very minimal, but it's there, right? And in fact, that's the other thing that bothers me too when I hear people talk, "Oh gosh, when I really muscle, I get side-to-side play." Okay, so what? It doesn't affect functionality. I continue to use this knife today, maybe not as much as before. Look, there's a little bit of rust spots in the back. And deployment, not even close to being smooth. It just doesn't do it. There's like no way. I'd have to rip flick this thing to get it to come out, right? So, big deal. No, it's not. I can use this just perfectly fine. So, fit and finish wise, really not that big of a deal. I've also hit on points of blade play. Does blade play really affect real world uses? Not really. All right. And the ease of the deployment, does the ease of deployment affect real world uses? Not really, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So bottom line is fit and finish, normally for me, affects very little in terms of real world uses. Okay, so in this section of the video, I'll talk about deployment. Either regardless of whether it's smooth deployment, speed of deployment, just how the pivot actually works. Now, right off the bat, you're probably already gonna know what I'm gonna say. In terms of deployment, there's really no, there's no functionality impact in a real world use, except for, and I will caveat with this, is that maybe if you were a soldier and that you need that, you need that speed and the reliability of the knife deploying properly, and I can get that. But then again, why not just carry a fixed blade? It's legal for you to carry one when you're a soldier, but I can see how the need of deployment for that particular aspect would be fine. Or if you were, say, a parachutist, and you need that speed of deployment and the reliability to actually cut the paracord if you actually get tangled up, all right? I can see that. Or you're a fisherman and, some rope get wrapped around your feet when you drop the anchor. I don't know. All right. But I'm just talking about the normal average user, meaning like me. All right. Smooth deployment has never been an issue for me. Yes, it's fun. And we all love sitting here, doing this with our knives all day long until our fingers go raw. And, over and over and over, you actuate the lock bar, you actuate the flipper. I used to do this with the Para 2, right? And I love to watch that blade just drop. Real world usage, not so much. You know, you can open it slow. If I ever need to take my knife out to cut a box, you know, part of a box for recycling, cut some paper, slicing the fruit, whatever, there is really no functionality impact in terms of speed of deployment versus the smoothness of deployment. And everything. All right. So this is going to be a short segment because simply there is nothing, I think, nothing against it. All right. So the Para 2, oops, can't even do it. The Para 2 deploys very nicely. The S&G, however, does not. This is not a very smooth knife at all. All right. I mean, I could flick it out, sure, with practice, but I mean, by comparison, this is like probably the worst deploying knife ever in terms of if you're talking about smooth deployment. All right. It's not very smooth, even opening it slow, and it's not very smooth when you go to flick it out. So it's kind of like that weird middle ground here. But does it affect functionality? No, it's just perfectly fine. It cuts really well. In fact, you can see I put a lot of use through this knife. All right, my Unum Sabenza. Okay, I need to stop doing these reviews. my CRK Unumzan. All right, very smooth deployment, but these thumb stubs hurt my fingers. I really hate them. I really truly hate them. But does it affect functionality? No, it does not. You know, it's just, you know, you open it slow, you open it fast, whatever, it cuts what you need to do. At the end of the day, it's just going to function just as a knife. The Rick Hinder XM18, horrific flipper, by the way. This is a flipper that doesn't flip, and I heard the new ones flip a lot better, but these older ones, the detent is so horrific that are so weak that they just don't do it. You have to like do something. You have to do a specialty kind of like push forward, down, and then rock back, and then they come out. Right? Does it affect functionality? No, you know, not really. Finally, the Boker Excalibur. This one does not flip at all. You can adjust the pivot to loosen it up, but then you get like massive blade play. Again, blade play doesn't really matter to a certain extent, but still, I wanted something where the pivot is tight. You know, having a knife is like having a car. You want to maintain it to the utmost efficiency possible for whatever the knife's designed for. This knife was not designed to be flicked out, really. I mean, I know a lot of videos say, oh, you can flick it out if you adjust the pivot. No, there's really no reason for this knife to be flicked out. This is a gentleman's folder in my mind, and you just open it nice and slow. Again, has no bearing on functionality and no impact on cutting at all whatsoever. So that's my take on deployment. Okay, now we go on to jimping. So jimping, of course, has been made widely popular by Nut and Fancy, and which is where the first time I ever even heard the term jimping at all. All right, literally they're just traction grooves, if you will, you know, cut into the back blade spines to you know, just afford more traction when you're using it. So when I hear people talking about, oh, the jimping's horrific on here, you know, or it's really great and it's afford to keep your fingers in, I will say, however, I will concede that jimping is actually quite useful in my real world usage of knives. So you have knives like the PXL here that have literally have no jimping on it anywhere, right? It's purely a gentleman's folder, and of course, you know, in a real world use, it affects very little for me because I'm not really doing much twisting or stabbing or whatever, you know, and mainly jimping for me is like whenever you do like a lot of hard push cuts, and if your knife ever gets caught in the material cutting, your fingers can start sliding forward. All right, and that is actually a true thing, and I have found myself, you know, on these, especially with these smoother handles smoother handled knives, jimping actually does actually come into a lot of use, and of course that also blends in with handle ergonomics as well, especially if you have a nice deep choils for you to kind of lock your fingers in. I will concede that is actually something that is useful. So when it comes to especially these straight handled knives, if the jimping isn't you know, somewhat decent, you know, and you're doing something chores that are a little bit harder, it does affect it. One of the examples is Emerson knives. Now, Emerson knives have been known to have some very nice handle ergonomics, in my opinion, in my experience, all right? So their jimping is absolute crap, by the way. I'm so sorry. most of the Emerson knives, actually all of the Emerson knives I have, they all feature jimping, and I swear to God, this is just more of an aesthetic and a beauty feature than it really is a functional feature. This is no function to me whatsoever, when by comparison, that is, all right? Even this Excalibur, which is, you know, less than half the price of this Roadhouse here, this thing has really hard cut jimping. And this one's nice on this because the handle is just straight. There's nothing keeping my fingers from slipping up on the blade. In real world usage, when I am cutting, I do like slam my thumb right into this jimping. So when I'm cutting, and I do find that my even then my sometimes under harder loads of cuts, my index finger actually does really start sliding forward a little bit. But because my thumb is so locked into this top part, you know, and I'm getting like the whites of my fingers out here, it does lock in. It does work. Now, had there been no jimping here, I would probably continue to slide down the blade like this, and I have to readjust my grip. With the Emersons, luckily, however, that most of their knives have these nice deep cutout choils, you know, or, you know, whatnot, that really lock your finger in. So even if I was to slip on this knife, it's pretty much impossible. Well, I wouldn't say impossible, but unlikely, just because, you know, you got this nice cutout groove here. So, so I will concede that jimping is extremely nice, especially if you get jimping on a thumb ramp. So not only do you have good jimping, like the Para 2 are known to have, but you don't have it on like a flat surface where, you know, in the unlikely case your thumb does slip forward off the jimping, it just, you know, your thumb will continue to slide forward because there's obviously no traction up here. On the Para 2, however, when you get locked into this is pretty much just locked in. I mean, your thumb, unless your thumb slips up and then over the blade, which is, again, very highly unlikely, this is very useful. So that is my real world take on jimping. Okay, so this section of the video, we're going to be talking about handle ergonomics, all right? Again, another highly talked about topic when it comes to knife reviewers, all right? In real world practice, handle ergonomics to me personally is actually a very big thing for me, all right? And it also depends on what you do for a living or what you use your knives for, and again, how hard you're actually using your knives. So my best examples on the table would be these three in the middle, all right? This is the Boca Excalibur, which you've probably seen already way too much in this entire video. This is meant to be more of a gentleman's folder. Would I use this for hard tasks? If I had to, in an emergency, you know, this is the only knife on me, yes. I mean, there's obviously, you have no choice. You're gonna use what you have available, you know. Now, in terms of handle ergonomics, this feels very good in the hand because it's relatively straight. It's got a little bit of, you know, grooves on it, and you know, it's nice, but it doesn't lock my hand in, which means that anything harder than just cutting through cardboard, you know, I'm not gonna be able to use this knife for, because I will just probably eventually slip up on the blade if I really torque and twist on it, all right? Same with the Whisper. The Whisper is even worse than the Excalibur, all right? The only thing the Whisper has over it is that the handle is actually slightly thicker, which means I can get a ever so slightly grip on it, and of course I put nail polish on the handle, which provides a tiny bit of traction, but the nail polish is wearing off, so eventually this will become a smoother handle again. There's no jimping, no nothing, no finger choils, no nothing keeping my hand from just going whoop and then cutting my own fingers. All right, the Terzula 515. Same kind of deal, very reminiscent of the Excalibur, except that it is much thicker handles, but of course it's thinner this way, which means that you really, you know, you have to really get a grip on this thing in order to be effective with it. Real world, it does just fine through just light tasks, but if you're going into heavier tasks, you're going to want something with a little bit better handle ergonomics. Now, when I say handle ergonomics, it's not just about comfort, you know, because let's face it, no matter how the knife is designed, yes, and I will concede that there's certain knives that feel better in the hand in terms of comfort, but overall, your hand will mold to the handle. It's not the other way around. The handle doesn't mold around your hand, you know. So when it comes to handle ergonomics, yeah, I get it. You know, there's some more comfortable than others, but for the most part, if you need to hold on to something, you're going to hold on to it, right? There's no need. I mean, I can hold on to something completely blocky. You know, yes, this is unergonomic, but you know, if I really grip down on it, I can still get a good handhold on it. So that's really not the point. All right, now you want to get some really good handle ergos on here. It'd be the CQC 15. Nice palm swell, locks in on both sides. So once I get a hold on this knife, I don't go forward and I don't go backwards. It's pretty much just dead on perfect handle ergonomics for the CQC 15. And I got a thumb ramp, you know, so I mean, look, it just looks really comfortable. And in a way it is, you know, and under hard uses, when I'm really gripping down, yes, there are hot spots, this part specifically in the palm swell that hits right into the corners of my fingers, but I know for a fact if I start really twisting and, you know, really getting into whatever I'm cutting, it's not going to slip right out of my hand, because even then the handle material is really grippy as compared to Excalibur, or even as compared to the 515, where this is wood. This G10 is really smooth out. There's a lot less traction when you come to those. All right. And let's not forget about the Para 2. Again, very good ergos on here. And I feel a little bit more confident doing like harder tasks with this, although the blade, you know, being a high flat ground, it's really meant for slicing, not for anything really hard use. You know, probably get something with a thicker tip on it. And that kind of lead me also into handle materials as well. How important is that in real world usage? I would have to give that a mediocre to moderate, mediocre, oh my lord, moderate importance to me in real world usage. So for example, like I just mentioned, when you get materials that are slightly too slippery, then you definitely want to have some good ergos, because you're going to slip up. Now, had this Excalibur been any more grippier, or maybe had traction lines or traction grooves cut into it, it'd make this knife that much better to be put towards a harder use application. This is one of my best examples right here. This is the SR1, all right, the Lion Steel. Very good ergos. Got a nice little palm swell, got a little bit of a choil here, and a slight bit of like a reverse choil if you want to. It just kind of hooks your hands in, not too bad, except for the fact that this is TI, and these grooves here serves very little to hold your fingers in. In fact, most of the time it's even really hard to deploy and open the knife, just because when I'm doing this, like my whole hand just it just slides across the handle. And it's really not that great in terms of like really hard use. I'd have to be wearing like high traction gloves, I mean like maybe mechanics gloves or something like that, to really torque on this thing. And I would not feel comfortable, you know, with no gloves on and then torquing and twisting with this knife, because it is really slippery. For that, I would just go with the CQC 15, really. So that would be that'd be my example right here. This is the Alan Lischwitz knife. I don't actually quite remember what the name of this was, but this knife, it's kind of funny, because at first I fell in love with this knife because I love the way it looks. When I got it, it didn't really look that great, but when I started using it, it's actually quite excellent. All right, so this has a lot of hot spots on it. You know, when you're really gripping down on it hard. All right, because these are I don't know what they call this kind of a milling pattern, but it's really just like holding on to, like, you know, a rock in your hand that's been shaped into a handle. So when you're gripping down on it, it really hurts. All right, but I can't deny that this provides a lot of traction under hard use. I mean, your hands don't go anywhere because of this little dimpled surface. I don't know how much you guys can see that, but it is just crazily, yeah, there you go. See how it's all rocky? It looks like I'm holding onto a mountain, all right, a cliffside or something. This is really hard cut. It actually hurts my thumbs when I really, you know, kind of, you know, go back and forth on it like that. But at the same time, the handle ergos are perfect, and the handle combined with the handle materials, it really holds your fingers in. So it's quite functional, despite how ugly this thing actually kind of looks in certain cases. All right. So this is my opinion on real world on handle ergonomics. Okay, in this section of the video, I'll be talking about lockup percentage. Again, another topic that has been talked about on a lot of knife reviews. You know, how much is too much, and how little is too little, all right? So let's go and zoom in on these two knives here. We got the SOG Pentagon Elite on the left, and I got my Pohanlu Bluefin. So now, maybe the Pentagon Elite isn't the best example. So let's grab the Unumzon out here, all right? So, if you can see, the Unumzon has an incredibly late lockup. I mean, we're talking, it's not quite contacting the show side yet, but it is pretty much at 100%. I mean, I would say this is like 95 to 98% lockup. The Bluefin, on the other hand, however, you can see that, it's just about, what, 5% maybe? Okay, so what people have been talking about is that if the knife has a really late lockup, then, you know, you know, as the knife wears down over and over, repeated usage, you may start to develop side to side, left and right, you know, just basically blade play, even when knife is fully locked up. And that's actually kind of a valid point, all right? Although I will have to say in real world uses, I hadn't really experienced that yet actually, what am I saying? I have. That was why I brought the SOG Pentagon Elite out. Sorry, this isn't a very organized video. So this knife, this is the reason why I brought the SOG Pentagon Elite out. You really can't see it, but this knife, this lock bar tab actually is touching, boy. Well, I guess I'm not going to be able to really get a good but this lock bar is actually touching the show side. Now this actually does have blade play. So in terms of actually adjusting this to not have blade play anymore, it's going to be extremely, well, I don't even think you can do it really, because the bars are touching the side. There's nothing more for the bar to actually touch, you know, and to catch on to the actual tang, because it's been worn down so much that it just swings freely practically. So this Pentagon Elite, I don't know if you guys can hear it. It has blade play, up and down blade play, which can't be really adjusted, and it has side-to-side blade play as well, not as much as the up and down. All right, so this is actually a valid concern. And now, but back to the very first segment of the video, how much does blade play actually affect anything in terms of real-world usage? Very little. If it's only very little blade play, if it's wildly swinging around, it's time to get a new knife. All right, but just a tiny bit of blade play, it's not the end of the world. The knife still cuts. You can still use it. It's not going to really, you know, matter too much, at least in my experience. All right. Now, in these terms, if you have not enough lockup in terms of the bluefin, will the knife fold on you? I'm gonna have to say no. I've been using the crap out of this knife, and I've never once had it fold on me. You know, I mean, and we're not even talking about the security of a flipper tab saying that it won't fold. This has not folded on me whatsoever, and because of the thick nature of the knife, I have done prying with it. I have done like twisting, like cuts. I have just straight up, you know, just chopping. Okay, look, the whole point is it won't fold on you. Neither will having a really late lockup. You know, some people are like, well, you know, once it contacts the other side, not only does it blade play, but sometimes, you know, if it gets loose enough, it's going to go and bend the bar. No, it doesn't. Okay, it does not do that, because my SOG Pentagon Elite is the only knife in my whole collection that actually contacts the show side, has massive blade play up and down, and a little bit side to side. No problems with it at all. I still continue to use this occasion from time to time. If this is the only knife on my table, I'll grab it. Who cares? You know, it's a knife. It cuts. All right. The bluefin never folded on me, ever. Not once. All right. And I finally got this to a point where there's not any more lock stick. Because I don't remember if I mentioned in my review of the bluefin that originally this had lock stick. This thing has zero lock stick right now. You know, once it locks open, it's just solid. There's no way. And let's not forget the whole nature and the physics of cutting. Cutting is when you're actually putting force, putting a blade into the material this way, and force is the material pushing up this way, which means that it's, you know, it's keeping the knife open technically, all right? So really, there's no big deal. Now, with that being said, these two are frame locks, and they do have an advantage when you grip down on the knife, your fingers are actually keeping the lock into the tang of the blade, which means that it is a little bit more safer lockup. Whereas on a liner lock, obviously, no matter how hard you grip it, you're not keeping this liner in place, obviously. But at the same time, I've never had a liner lock fold on me either from an early lockup. And most of my knives are so used anyways. I mean, this is the earliest locking knife I have, and this is the latest locking knife that I have. Neither one of these have ever folded on me, ever. All right, so again, my real world experience on early and late lockup. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about locking types, all right? And on the general whole, does the locking type actually affect real-world uses and functionality? I would have to say no, in my experience. These are all different types of locks here, which I'm going to go through. There are other specialty, more, you know, like for example, you know, G&G Hawk Designs. They have some really specialty kind of locks. I'm not going to go into there. These are more generic type of locks. Well, generic, more widely spread. Let's put it that way. And the only reason why I don't have a slip joint on here is because that is not technically a locking knife. So, excuse me. The first type of lock is a back lock. Now the back lock, You know, depending on what type of backlock you have. If you get like Cold Steel's version of a backlock, you're getting a really strong lock. But on a whole, backlocks have been extremely strong in the first place. There's really no buts about it. All right. So on the Spyderco Persian, you know, ease of deployment, yes. I mean, it's a little bit slower, and occasionally, depending on the type of or brand that they come from, the backlock you may have to push a little bit lower to get it to come. Or maybe there's some that are just really easy. You just press down and it, you know, it just drops, whatnot, right? So on a whole, backlocks, you know, you can't normally flick out a backlocking knife, but once they lock up, they're extremely solid in my experience. Next one up is, of course, the frame lock. Very popular locking type, very common locking type, very useful. The couple things good about a frame lock in my mind is the fact that it's just simple. All right, you don't have an extra scale. You can have a bolster lock, which is technically a frame lock with a another scale on top of it. But on a whole, a generic normal frame lock, it's just like this. All right, and the cool thing about that also is when you're using the knife and you're gripping down really hard on it, you're really torquing on it, your fingers are keeping this lock in a locked up position, which is a very high advantage for people who want that. You know, want that security, all right? I will say, however, there are certain frame locks that are very uncomfortable in the hand because you are actually touching a lock. If the lock face here, edges here are sharper, or they have, you know, wild jimping or just weird curves on it, it will serve to cut into your fingers, you know, whereas if you had just a normal liner lock, you know, the scale can be a certain way and the locking can be, you know, just out of your way, which will lead me into the next part, which is a frame lock, or I'm sorry, liner lock. So on a liner lock, excuse me, acts pretty much exactly the same way as a frame lock does, except that you don't get the added security of keeping the lock open when you're gripping down really hard on a knife. The one thing it does do, however, is clean up the appearance of the knife for me. So especially on this Alan Foltz custom, you know, I got a nice show side, and when you go to the reverse side, same exact as the show side, you know, no big deal. Whereas on a frame lock, you're always going to see this lock cutout and lock bar and everything, and then on the show side, you got a nice clean surface. So functionality wise, no problems. Actuates just like a frame lock, and that locks up just like a frame lock, but without the added security. All right. Next one is Spyderco's own compression lock. All right. In real world usage, this lock is very good. I've never had it fold on me once ever in any of my cutting tasks. Easy to shut, you know, just like that. So overall, very nice. The only thing I will say is that for lefties, it's very odd because you know, you can't really do this. So what I do is I put my thumb on here and I press it until the blade drops and it hits my middle finger, and then I can shut the blade the rest of the way. So for lefties, this is a little bit harder to use, whereas on these three, I feel like left-handed people have an easier time of closing them. I mean, certainly on a liner lock, you can just push over with your forefinger like that, get the blade started down, get the blade to start closing, and then you can, you know, shut the knife very easily. All right. Oh, one more thing about a frame lock I forgot to mention is that when you happen to have knives let's see if I have one on the table here. Actually, this is a prime example of it. So my CRK is also, or 21 is also a frame lock. The one thing I don't like about frame locks as well is that if there's certain lock bar that just has too much tension on it, so if you actually be holding it like this and you go to deploy it, it's actually, there we go. It's actually very hard to deploy, even with the CRK. So that's the other thing about a liner lock that's great, that no matter how bad how hard the lock is to deploy, when you're putting a lot of pressure trying to hold onto the knife, it doesn't affect pushing into the detemp ball into the blade. You can easily just, you know, flick it out like that, and no problems there. Next one is Benchmade's access lock. Very easy to deploy, very easy to you know, actuate and close, and it's fairly smooth on the whole. I mean, you can just hold the lock open, and you know, you can just do this little, you know, deal with it, and you flick it closed, and you know, whatever, right? So again, functionality wise, no problems with functionality. Never had any. Well, let's just face it, I've never had any one of these knives fold on me ever. You know, in my experience. But he's very good, completely ambi. So if you're left-handed, you can easily just grab and pull, and then, you know, shut the knife this way. I mean, it's not nothing new about it. Very similar is the arc lock, same kind of thing on this Tomcat. You know, I can actuate with my right hand, I can actuate with my left hand. There's no lock bar in the middle to get in the way for the most part, because it is so open, just like the access lock. You can easily just blow this out with some compressed air if you wanted to. There's no lock bar in the way, not that that actually makes a difference or anything like that. The very last one would be the button lock. Now, button locks on a whole for me is probably my least favorite lock. The reason being is that the normal button locks I get, until you break them in, which sometimes takes quite a while, they're very sticky. I don't know if you can hear that, but this one's actually a little broken in. When I first got this, I mean, my thumbs are going raw trying to push this stupid button in. But I will have to concede the lockup is extremely, extremely good. I mean, there's no blade play left, right, up, down, any direction whatsoever. But it is just not very smooth to actuate. So that's the only problem with the button lock I have. So until you break it in, the button lock's gonna feel like you're pushing in a bag of rocks. So other than that, very, very strong lockup, and also cleans up the interior of the knife. If, like for example, on this Freeman, if you happen to have standoffs instead of a spacer, you can blow this out with compressed air. There's not much to it. There's no liners in this thing. So I know Brian Ty does a lot of button locks as well, and there's, you know, other multiple companies that use button locks. But so here you go, button locks. So on a whole, do these actually affect functionality on a real world basis? No, it's just all comes down to your user style, and all comes down to your personal taste of what you like to look at, what you like to actuate, what you like to use. You know, in certain applications, some of these are better for others. You know, if you're looking for speed of deployment, don't get a back lock. All right, if you don't really care, go ahead and get a back lock. And if you feel like you need some security in terms of if you feel like the lock's gonna fail on you, get yourself a frame lock. All right, but otherwise, no functionality issues in terms of real world uses. Okay, so finally at the end of this video, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a bonus kind of a scene here. This is me talking about are ball bearings and flippers actually really necessary? And I'm gonna have to say no. In real world uses, this has like no bearing, if you will, on actual real world uses. Ball bearing pivots, I think, are overused in my opinion. And while they are fun, and I'll give you that, they're very, very fun to actuate and you know, deploy and flip and whatever. And if you really have a need for that speed of deployment, you know, get yourself an automatic. But other than that, yes, if you need that speed, you pull the knife out and you go bam, you know. But you know, by comparison, I have to say one thing is that the Kershaw Volt here is not a ball bearing knife. All right. So while it's not as quick, it's not bad as well. So let's take a look here. Let's see if I can get this done. So on there, you can probably see that this is ever so slightly slower, but in a real world situation, does that really make a massive difference? Probably not. All right, this is not as smooth, you know, but it's pretty smooth, decent. And then you got again the Allen Fultz here custom that is actually on just, I think this is just on Teflon washers. Oops, I hit my finger. Sorry. Very quick. Actually, this is pretty much a silent. But look how quick that is. So this is, let's see, let's take a look at these two here. Pretty much just as fast as the ZT. So ball bearing washers, you know, if ball bearings versus washers, if you do a knife with washers correctly, it's going to be just as quick. Now, even without flippers, it's pretty much unnecessary. All right. So here is, well, first of all, this is my SD3, which I recently got. And if I can get, it's really smooth because this also has a ball bearing pivot on there. I don't really see that it's actually necessary. I mean, even in a knife of this style, I mean, let's just forget style. Just in a generic knife like this, it's really not necessary to have a ball bearing pivot. Yes, it's nice and smooth, and you know, it's a joy to deploy. It's very, you know, very fun. But on a whole, when you get a knife that's done right, this is on Teflon washers. All right, it is almost glass smooth, and I've done nothing but take this apart, clean it, and re-oil it again. I mean, look how fast that is, and look how smooth that is. So, same with my Marty Young. All right, this is on phosphor bronze washers. All right, watch this. Extremely smooth. This thing drops as if it was on bearings. So again, are are flippers and ball bearings necessary? I would have to say no. It just pretty much comes down to your own preference, what you like to deploy, basically how you want to deploy the knife, whether you like a thumb stud, a thumb disc, a flipper, a French flipper like in this case. There really is no right answer to this, and again, it doesn't really affect real world uses, in my opinion. All right. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys with this parting shot. I have a feeling this video is going to be extremely long, so I really do apologize for that. But, you know, this is just some things I've been thinking about, and how critical we as a knife community are towards the knives that we buy. And this is from a user's perspective in real world versus a theoretical or a collector's perspective, which I used to be. And I am guilty of that, so I apologize. But, you know, you can sit behind the camera and you can theorize about things like, oh, well, the handle ergonomics are great, you know, it will really provide to hold your fingers in. The jimping is great, so, you know, I can imagine that while you're stabbing into something, you know, your thumb will not slip up. That's all great and said and done, right? But in the end, it only matters if you can really put it to the test in the real world. And I've grown away from that whole theoretical reviews lately, so... anyway, so this is just my take on a few things that we as knife reviewers talk about, and you know, how they really do affect me, at least in a real world situation. So again, sorry for the long video. Questions, comments, please leave it below. It's always welcome. Constructive criticism. And you know what, without you guys, I wouldn't have a channel, nor would I be doing these videos as well. So thank you to each and every one of you who have take the time out of your busy days to watch my stuff, and also to comment. So, and it's greatly appreciated. All right. So anyways, until the next time, take care. Have a nice day. I'll catch you guys on the next one.